can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Justin Frenette of himandher.ca. And Justin, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, I always love the one with Todd Taskey. He has the Second Bite podcast. So he pairs private equity with agencies. And it's called the Second Bite because sometimes when the agency sells to private equity, they make more on the second bite than they do on the first. And he talks about valuations and the landscape of M&A and everything like that. So check that out. I also did one with Jason Swank. Jason Swank talks about how he built up his agency to over 8 figures, sold it, and then he's been buying agencies. And in like a very short span of time, that company he built to over $30 million. Through acquisitions. So that was a really interesting episode too. Another fan favorite of mine, Justin, is Adee Clevitt. She helps people create SOPs. And we geeked out on productivity tools, what we should, software, tech stack, and what we're using, and just how to be more productive in general, and and systems, which helps the business run smoothly. So check that out, many more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution, the production. Justin, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can run their business, develop great relationships, and create great content. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I'm excited to introduce Justin Frenette. He's co-founder of Him and Her. And Him and Her is a Canadian-grown creative agency. And it was founded on the belief that design and development belong together. This is translated to innovating the real estate marketing scene. And we're going to talk about some of the niches and the evolution of their niches. With that scene, they've helped sell over $2 billion in pre-construction homes. They have also helped amazing direct-to-consumer brands, Lomi, Crown Verity, Raffi Jewelers, and others. And he's actually a former BlackBerry and Magnet Forensics alum. So Justin, thanks for joining me.
For having me, Jeremy.
I want to get into what you learned from BlackBerry, what you brought into the agency, but start with what is Him and Her and what do you do?
Him and Her, as you said, is a creative agency. And the magic we found is partnering with our clients long-term and augmenting their teams. So here at Him and Her, we're a 24-person studio that has design and development and digital marketing in-house. All companies, mainly internal marketing teams, are facing the pressures of finding good talent, retaining that talent, juggling a freelancer roster, choosing between different agencies with different expertise. And so we offer an all-in-house solution that makes their lives easier, helps them execute, helps them accelerate their growth, avoiding a lot of those pitfalls and challenges. And, at BlackBerry, I have a huge thank you to that team and joining that company. I joined as a co-op at a college, started part-time, started full-time. I bumped around a couple teams. I ended up doing big data, internal tooling systems there. And from an agency or owning an agency perspective, having seen the inside of big corporate company, the politics, budgeting, how reliable software needs to run, that was testament to learnings that have helped the product offering that Him and Her offers our clients.
I can kind of see, Justin, like if I were just to look at your bio, I would not guess a creative agency, right? Because your background is kind of in software tools development. And so I would have guessed, I don't know, a custom shop where you're developing SaaS or apps or something. But but I think maybe I assume your wife has influenced this as well, because you co-founded this with your wife. So talk about that a little bit, and starting the company with your wife. What was the initial thought? Because again, even though it's corporate, it's a leap to start your own business. What was the thought at that time?
The thought, so I met Erin, we met socially. She was an art director at a local agency servicing BlackBerry, HTC, Sun Life. At the time, smartphones were new. How you use the user interfaces on them were new. So that agency was doing a lot of work creating videos and translating them in terms of educational video portals. Her frustration was stemmed from the fact that everybody was running off to the big city, Toronto, work at Toronto agencies. Nobody respected the relationship between design and development. Developers were these golden boys that you threw the work over and you couldn't talk to them or question them. And so she had been freelancing for a while, and she had a website project, and she asked if I knew how to build a website. And I said, sure, I can build a website. And that started our 10-year journey to what we are today at Him and Her. We went out to prove that you can start a world-class agency, not in a big city, and that you can do it with design and development in-house, and you can do it better.
I'd love to hear what advice you have for people working with spouses or family. It's not easy in general, especially starting a new company. There's a lot of stressors in there. What did you learn that other people should know that they may have to overcome if they're working with a spouse or a family member?
I'd say number one that's helped us through the years, obviously, is trusting your partner, knowing that they're coming to you with feedback or an idea. They're doing it in the best interest of both of you, not just for themselves. Second, and most important, would be dividing and conquering the tasks and the ownerships. When you're both juggling ownership, that's never a recipe for success. I'd say we probably had an easier end of that because she was an art director, drove the creative side of the agency, and I drove the technical side of the agency. But we laughed. Generally, opposites attract. And so Erin, funny enough, was always the risk taker. So the first hire, the first office lease, she was the one that pulled the trigger. And I was the one that was always like, oh, I don't know if we're ready yet. And so I'm the opposite, I'd say, in social and adventure, but in business, I was always more conservative. And I give it to her to taking those risks to get us where we're at today. Those are the two major contributors that have led to our success as a couple.
Or some key hires position-wise that helped you grow?
We had an interesting take on that. So our very first hire was actually Erin's mom. She was our bookkeeper. We were the talent in the company. So if Erin's busy designing and I'm busy developing, then we need to make sure invoicing and bookkeeping and all that was set straight from the beginning. So that was our very first hire before our first, designer and developer for production.
That's interesting. So what was the next one after that? Now we get things even more complicated. You're working with your wife and your mother-in-law?
Working with wife, mother-in-law out of our home. We converted our master bedroom into the office. So we hired at the time when we really got into it, Erin left her job to go full-time. We had hired Sandy. We hired a full-time designer. And I had switched from BlackBerry over to Magnet Forensics, another pivotal role in my career. I helped build out their Salesforce system, which was a foundation for their fast-paced growth. They went public and just recently sold private. They're a huge success story. They were a client of ours over the last 10 years. But it got to the point after those first couple hires that we needed to hire a developer. I couldn't do all the development work in the evenings. So I went to Magnet and said, hey, I got to go do this. I'm going to regret it later in life if I don't try and build this company with my wife. And I said, what I do for you in this office, I can do remote. So why don't you guys stay on as a client? And Adam and Jad over there said yes and trusted me. And that was pivotal. And so our developer joined the team and I jumped in full time.
That's what my next question was like, how you got your first clients and customers. So was that on easy sell, hard sell? Be like, hey, listen, you can pay me for this project. And now you don't have to pay my taxes anymore because I'm not a staff member. I mean, what was the conversation like there?
It was easier than I thought. They wanted to keep me. They didn't want me to leave and start my own agency. But the reality was there were some cost savings. The reality was the value I was offering them was unique and hard to find at that time. Somebody with Salesforce and development expertise, and so with that trust I'd built up, it just made sense to keep it going. Ultimately, they got big enough. They hired somebody to take over that role, and that makes sense. That's the agency life. You generally are working yourself out of a job. But our first couple of clients really founded on Aaron's, couple years of freelancing. A pivotal, and why you can never underestimate contacts and your network, is we had met a small bookkeeping agency, accounting agency, that probably connected us to our first 10 or 20 clients. And that was a foundation of our growth when we were small, just 7 people. You're dealing with a lot more small businesses, and that's critical because you have to build up your portfolio and your trust and your repertoire to get to the next bigger, better companies. And so that conversation and a networking event with a bookkeeper led to most of our first clients.
What was, oftentimes I'm not going to my bookkeeper or accountant and saying, hey, I need development work. How was that even happening? Or did they have a unique type of practice?
They had a very unique practice. They were very successful. They sold their business several years later, and they did well on that sale. Really, it started with a rebrand and a website launch for them. And when you look back at what you charged for your first project, it's it's very cute.
What did that look like for you?
We, I think, made $1,000 rebranding them and $3,000 for the website. So everything has a couple more zeros nowadays, but it was worth every hour we put into those projects because they loved working with us, built that trust, so they recommended us to every other company they needed. And when you're starting out, strategy side of it grew later in the later years. So it was very much production, design, branding, development. And so that was a lot of the work: websites, brands, traditional marketing, print material, digital materials. But web was definitely unique. Websites and branding drove a lot of the growth before we started getting into the bigger, more strategic work.
I'd love to hear the evolution of, we were talking before we hit record, Justin, about niches.
Mm-hmm.
I just had Corey Quinn. He was the CMO at Scorpion and helped build them while he was there. They went from 20 million to 150 million. And he talks a lot about verticals and niches. And so talk about at least the evolution of like, where you started with the types of clients and then where you are now.
That's a great question. So I'd say into the first 5 years, we very much were a local community agency, kind of 20 kilometers around Kitchener-Waterloo. And our clients were everything: high-tech companies, local small businesses, community groups, any and all. And so our categories were loosely what we would call mid-market, high-tech, community, and small business. We saw the real power of niching when we had rebranded a local brokerage called Condo Culture, redid their website, built them a pretty powerful tool for lead generation on the real estate side. And they trusted us and brought us into our first real estate project. It was a pre-construction condo, 188 units. We looked at how pre-construction marketing was happening, all the way from the branding to the way we communicate and market to the way we address clients on the website and how we do sales centers and experiences. And we flipped it on its head. We saw a lot of things that were done well and a lot of things that weren't done well. The biggest mistake we saw is the old school model was, hey, here's my new condo, come to the sales center, here's your brochure, let me tell you about it and sell you on it. And we said, that's ridiculous. You're spending years building this thing. 6 to 12 months out, we should be a teaser page, building SEO, gathering leads. We should be starting a newsletter, getting people to fall in love with this product. So when you open up the sales center, you're just taking an order. Data was horribly lacking. We were doing things like surveying the lead list for access to the event. So you could ask what their budgets were. You could survey people and ask, you could send 3 mood boards of interior suites and ask them which one they like more. and they're telling you what should be your premium package suite. That's just the tip of the iceberg of how we were using data. So that resulted in a 48-hour sellout of that condo. So a $250 million project in 48 hours. We broke every price per square foot record in the region. The fastest condo it sold out was in a couple months in the region. And from there, clients just started reaching out to us direct through our relationship with Condo Culture to us directly. And that's when we really saw the power of a niche. And that niche has been a pillar of Him and Her since day one. Now, niches can be a double-edged sword. So real estate, we always knew, came with some risks as a business. Real estate is a very up and down market. And as we all know, real estate's in a down right now. And so the other half of our business we insured was very horizontal. It still was that mid-market, high-tech, small business. Basically, we'll work with anybody if you've got a trusting relationship with us. And where niching has kind of reared its head again is as we began to expand into the West Coast, Vancouver, into some of the northern US, getting included in larger bids and RFPs, we realized that you can't be a generic marketing agency nowadays. You're going up against agencies that are niched in the veterinary space, agencies that are niched in clean energy space. And so we spent the last 3 months of this year working and workshopping on what clients have we had the most fun with? Have we brought the most success to? Can we say we're experts in just like we are real estate? And we're actually in the process of niching down into high-end consumer goods. So some really great companies we can talk about in that niche, but that's where we feel the future is for Him and Her in our secondary niche.
Yeah. And if you're just listening to the audio, there is a video component to this. So you can kind of see I'm on the himandher.ca website. And so you can poke around there if you're interested. And we're here on the real estate. And one of the ways because I know a lot of the agents I talk to, sometimes they want to niche down and there's some trepidation in certain respects. But like, how do I do that? I don't want to alienate the clients I work with, the whole conversation. But like you've done a good job. It looks like, at least creating these separate pages, right? I mean, you guys, that's what you do in general. But talk about, you said how you think about niching, right?
Yeah.
And you said your thought process on that, I think is valuable to hear. So the clients you have the most fun with, the clients you create the most success for them. What other criteria do you think of when you are thinking of niching?
Yeah, the right size client. So, we've done a lot of work. We just implemented the EOS system, entrepreneurial operating system. That's helped us through this process of niching and refining where our expertise are. And outside of just, do you have fun with them? Do you bring them the most value? Is they're the right size? Like in our opinion, when we think about best in class consumer goods, you're talking about a higher end product that's likely servicing a more affluent community that's going to be less affected by economic downturns. You're not chasing people to the bottom of the dollar to sell the cheapest thing. Typically, those clients are going to value an agency and their expertise. We see them in two categories. Either they're high growth, so they have those challenges we talked about at the beginning. They can't hire talented people fast enough. They're paying and juggling too many freelancers, or they're a company that's just been around a very long time. Maybe they haven't entered the direct consumer space. Maybe they're just looking to refresh because they know now they need to innovate. They can't rest on their laurels anymore. Those are all elements that we've seen when we look at the clients we have in that category. And I'd say that was the advantage of being generalistic, is it allowed us to work with so many different companies and see where we brought the most value and where we had the best fit. And then obviously your market research, e-commerce, direct to consumer, it's a growing category, luxury retail, omni-channel, like those are all areas that have high projected growth in the coming years, regardless of the current downturn. And that's all builds confidence. I think the other thing is, you can get scared to niche down, but that doesn't mean you have to drop every client or your relationship. So to us, entering this niche means publicly our website's going to change. Who I target from a sales perspective, from a marketing perspective, is going to become more focused and crystallized. It doesn't mean that, a client of ours like Canada Life might reach out, who have a long-standing relationship with us, and they need a project and we're not busy, that we won't take that behind the scenes. Just means we're not going to talk about it. We're going to publicly focus on the work we want, and you can take that filler work if you need it behind the scenes. But David C. Baker was definitely instrumental reading in that niching journey we've been on over the last couple months.
Love it. Yeah, his name has come up a few times. I'd love to hear what other people in the agency space that you follow or recommend people to. But I just want to reiterate, I love what you said there. Most fun, most success for clients, size, less economic downturn, high growth, stability of market, which it seems like you almost hedged against your real estate niche, because you're like, yeah, this is a great niche, but there's ups and downs. So you even hedged against the niches that you went into a little bit. What other resources or people do you have you learned from in the agency space? You mentioned David C. Baker. Who else?
I've always looked up to Code and Theory as an agency. I connected with Dan briefly at CES, and we've shared an email or two back and forth. I mean, he had some very prompt advice around, you can't do it all yourself. You need to bring in people you can trust. And over the pandemic at Him and Her, we really did focus on building in a management team. So instead of Aaron and I managing 14, 15 creatives and developers, we built out, a true company. EOS has kind of been the epitome of that, to say we have a team lead of development, we have a team, executive creative director, we have a director of operations, a director of client services, people that we can rely on to help build the company, and let Aaron and I focus on where it needs to go and the next level of what we want to achieve. That was definitely a key piece of advice from Dan. And then in the agency space overall, we've actually felt like the downside to starting agency in a smaller community is that network of mentors isn't there. And so most of the mentors I've relied on have been Adam Belcher of Magnet Forensics. He's always been gracious with his time, even though he's got a very large company under his hands. I would also say Chris McBride. He owns Myovision, another very successful Canadian tech company. And the local community in Kitchener-Waterloo is just very tight. So I get a lot of diverse, I would say, mentor perspectives, but we haven't actually had a lot of agency perspectives. David C. Baker in his books and writing was the first realization of, wow, somebody who's actually in your niche does have a lot of valuable insight. And so I'd say that would be a lacking point. We probably could have gotten farther than we are today with a proper agency mentor earlier in our entrepreneurial adventure.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Justin. And you mentioned building out a leadership team. That's probably takes a lot of weight off of you and your wife's shoulders in a lot of ways. What are some? It's not always smooth sailing hiring in general. What are some things you experienced, some challenges in that you learned from to help bring on better people?
When you start the business and you're the doer in the business, letting go of perfection and the way you want it to be done is definitely one of the hardest things to do. You have to be okay with it getting 80% there and giving them the breathing room to learn and grow. Erin's done a great job of that. I lack a little bit behind her, but we're eventually there. Our dev team lead was one of our last hires on the company side. So I was always juggling sales and the development team, which are two different worlds. I would say that outside of giving them the autonomy to make mistakes, just building a relationship, it's a different level of management. So before managing your employees who are doing the work daily, there's a different kind of management to that than managing managers. And so you go through this like disconnect of, well, what are the direct reports under them doing? Like, I've built such a relationship with them as like a family business for so long. That's a hard thing to let go of. And just process and accept. And then there's also like a bit more, Erin's the humbler side. I'm the more aggressive side of the him and her relationship. So Erin definitely struggled with well, what is the value I'm bringing if all of my jobs are being handed over to other people? And to go through that mindset change of our job is to think about the future of the business, the bigger picture of the business, handle the more important relationships and accounts. So you change as a person as you go through that, and just understanding the nuances of managing this next middle layer of people who are at a more advanced point in their career. They have stronger opinions, which is good and challenging. So it's definitely been a learning experience.
From a director of operations standpoint, I'm curious your thoughts, because I've seen people and they bring someone in from the outside or they bring someone within. What was your path?
Yes, our path was from without. Again, it was actually a personal connection of Erin, a longtime friend. She was at an in-house marketing department. It was actually at the Stratford Festival, so a lot of project management and process around the hustle and bustle of the theater space. So what was great is there's a lot of parallels to the agency space. She also, before that career path, was a graphic designer and went to school with Erin. So somebody that has agency experience in at least one of the departments that we produce, or is in an environment that's as high paced as us, was definitely critical. And then operations, it's not an easy job. It's a pretty thankless job. You're constantly bringing change and people don't like change. So trusting somebody that has the strength to handle that role and trust the guidance you're telling them is required, because people don't like change. And that's the biggest thing all companies face, but we've seen it, is going from a 15-person mom and pop shop to a 25, 30-person medium business that's growing. That culture and that change and just people management is it's what you spend 90% of your time is managing the people and making sure they're happy and doing what they need to do and productive. And with a younger crowd, like we have a lot of young employees, today's society and the pandemic, like there's a lot of challenges around keeping people positive about the outlook on things. So
what do you do that has worked and maybe that hasn't worked when you step in the new role of managing managers and overseeing the business?
I would say what wasn't working and why we implemented EOS is we knew some of the fundamentals of, okay, we've got challenges we need to solve, goals we're trying to hit, but how do we more structurally manage them? We're also in a pivot where Erin's taking a step back further to focus more on the creative side and have time for our young girls. We've got 2 young daughters, and I'm stepping more into the lead CEO role at the company. And so I'm way less organized than Erin is. And so if you're familiar with EOS, there's your visionary and your integrator. Erin's
I want to give a shout out. I had Gino Wickman on the podcast. People can check that out. And I also had Mark Winters on the podcast, who co-wrote Rocket Fuel with Gino Wickman. And what Jess is talking about is there's the visionary and integrator. It sounds like you're the visionary. Basically, you leave a wake behind you, and someone has to pick up all the pieces that you've left. But keep going on. Now you're stepping into the role. You're smiling, yes.
Yeah. That they call me the cowboy. There's lots of rules and processes, and I'm the worst employee at them all, which isn't ideal. So EOS was a framework. The tools and the framework that it provides and the structure it provides was absolutely needed for us, and we've seen the power of following that framework, looking at your data, setting your quarterly rocks. It all has really helped get everybody aligned on where we're going and clarify where we're going, and that's made a huge difference this year so far.
Keeping the workforce energized. Obviously, this whole, there's a balance, right? Working remote, in office. How does your company strike that balance?
Yeah, we currently operate very much like a workspace model, where we've asked the employees to come in 1 to 2 times a week, more if they can manage it. Humans are a creature of habit, so the pandemic has definitely instilled the habit of I like working from home. When everybody's in the office for a lunch and learns, we do lots of lunch and learns monthly with different departments sharing their expertise or insights. We do team potlucks. We do, we call it summer camp. So we always do an exciting outing. Anytime we're all together, the energy is there. And I think people forget the energy you get. It's so easy if you're having a bad day to be sitting at home, plugging away on a project, not around anybody else. And you're just going to sit in your feels all day. But when you're at the office, and sure, maybe you're having a bad day, but everybody else is having an okay or a great day, you get to feed off that energy and realize that, hey, the day's not so bad. We constantly, in our team updates, remind them that we're paid to do hard things. If a client had easy problems, there would be no need for agencies. We're here to solve problems that are hard. We're here to juggle work, and that pace, we have to forget, is exciting if you take a step back. The problems we solve are exciting, even the mundane problems. There's plenty of projects you'll do that aren't exciting, but if you really take a step back, what you learned on that boring project is probably a key skill or solution that you're going to use on a more exciting project. So we have a lot of open communication with the team. We share a lot about where the business is going, and so they feel part of it. They feel engaged, and just you have to put the effort into them and those initiatives to help them feel connected. Slack is big, even though we are disconnected. Slack's where we live day in and day out, and our team's has really adopted Slack over the last, probably 6 or 7 years. We have a strong kind of culture in Slack when we're not in the office together.
What else do you use in your tech stack, whether it's CRM, project management tools? So Slack is one. What are others?
Asana basically runs the company. Asana is where we keep our estimating and invoicing processes. Asana is where we have boards for all of the individual client projects. Asana is where we map up to the workflow view to check team workload capacity, agency life. You can set a plan for next week and it changes every day. And so we live and breathe in Asana. Every hour is what we use for time tracking. Obviously, with an agency, you always toe that line of employees can sometimes feel like they're just a commodity, like you need to track every hour, but there is a business side to this. The reality is we do need to track every hour, and it's not because I want to put more dollars in my pocket. We need to be profitable so that we can give you guys the raises you need. We can do the fun activities we want. We can hire the best people and work on the best projects. If we're not efficient, we can't do that. And we're also a little more hard on it because another founding principle we strive for, and Aaron hated, was the agency model view of you work 80 hours a week minimum, and that's what's expected. And we very much, having a young family, said, as much as possible, we want to be a 9-to-5 agency. That doesn't mean there's not times you work overtime. That doesn't mean there's not times the development team is doing employees early morning, but it does mean I want to respect your time. So you have to respect our time and hustle in that 9-to-5 and work your butt off. And then you don't need to work in the evenings and everything else. You can do it in the 9-to-5 if you work hard.
Were you at BlackBerry? What was the project management tool? Or was it like an internal? Were you using things like Asana there, or do you have more like an enterprise level solution?
Every team was different. So BlackBerry, I'd say, was like a bunch of different agencies all cobbled together. So on our internal data team, we were using Jira for our project management. I'm not sure what the managers were using to communicate within one another and report up, but any manager reporting was very much like, hey, I need data on how battery testing levels are doing this week. So you'd gather the raw data, they put it in a PowerPoint and just pony it on up through all the layers up to the top company. So Jira, definitely, they had more serious, intense project management, bug tracking software than we do. So you got to see that, and you got to see where you could lighten the load and balance how much time are we killing people with emails and processes and extra administration steps they need to do versus billing. Like we looked over the last year and there was just way too many meetings happening. We had to really tighten down on who needs to be in a meeting, because you just get caught up in, everybody should be in that meeting. But now you just had your whole project team, 6 people sitting on an hour-long meeting. That's 6 billable hours that disappeared that you weren't accounting for when you estimated that project. And so efficiency was the theme of kind of our current kind of theme we're we're finishing out this fiscal year is we need to be efficient as an organization so we can do more.
Just in managing projects, talk about, I know some have pods of people. When you take on a project, how does it work on the type of people and position that you put on that particular project? And maybe we'll take the consumer goods one, Lomi. We'll talk through Lomi. Like, how do you decide what team members are on this, and how do you manage that project from a team perspective?
Yeah, great question. There's a couple categories of projects and processes. Lomi falls under our retainer relationship process. So we make the Shopify Plus store. We participate. We just finished a large redesign and deploy for a new product launch. So the site and their product offering was evolving from one core hero product into secondary products, tertiary products, add-on products. And so the site needed to evolve from that initial phase. I've got one product and now I'm selling multiple things. So they entrusted us with the design process and build up. Actually just launched 2 weeks ago now. It sold out in 2 hours, the new product launch. So it was great to be a part of that. But team assignment, every project at Him and Her gets a project manager and an art director, because in our opinion, every project is creative at its core, no matter what we're doing. An art director is always a key lead on it. So where some agencies would have a project manager and maybe an account director, our view is that a project manager and an art director together act as an account director and have the client's best interests in mind. And then depending on the technical stack or the type of work, in this case, there was a strong web UX component. Obviously, Shopify Plus is a stack skill set. We brought in two of our designers, a senior designer and just a designer. And actually, depending on the project we're working on, 3 of our developers. So our dev team lead oversees the onboarding of Lomi, oversees the technical rollout, estimating timelines on the development side. Our front-end developer managed, I would say, 80% of the development. And then there would be key things like if it's a complicated nav, mega nav update or app integration, we would have our back-end dev come in and support with some of those elements. So
Nice.
they're a true sense of like, this is not a company where you build your website and leave it for 3 years. This thing is changing weekly, monthly, quarterly. There's major changes happening to it. And so we use a shared Asana board with the client where we're prioritizing on a monthly basis the goals for the month. Week by week, though, those priorities and last minute things pop up and you're constantly adjusting in a team meeting with the client on a weekly basis to make sure we're all aligned on process.
Yeah. How often do you meet with a client like that? And let me just reiterate. So like you have a project management lead, then you have an art director lead, and then you have, depending on what skill set of the project, this one, as you can see, by the way, if you're looking at this, Lomi is on the screen here. It says food waste isn't smart. It's time for something different. Yeah, you can poke through here some really cool stuff and features on the website, but skill set. So in this case, it's obviously designers, developers, and then certain types of developers under that. Talk a little bit more about of that piece as far as with Lomi.
Yeah, the initial retainer was very much just development. So, the core team working through the integrations, the updates they want, but they quickly saw, the additional skill sets we had. And so the design phase of this project started similar to almost every other project in that we identified the right skill sets. So like we said, a senior designer and a designer that would have the level of experience for Lomi as a client and their needs. Generally at Him and Her, everybody's a generalist, but people will have specialties in either UX or web or app or print, traditional print, et cetera. So we brought in a team that was more specialized on the web side. We go through a standard discovery. We go through our own research, best in class, not just in terms of competitors, but we always cross compare other industries. And then we used Figma to go back and forth with the UX design with the Lomi team to get their feedback and approvals, and then we queue up development. And so every client is really a variation of that process of you get an art director and a PM, you get the correct team to lead the project based on the goal, and we go through that discovery and process. So whether it's a web project and we go through our web process, a rebranding process. Pre-construction real estate is a beast of its own because you're basically juggling 50 different project types. You've got splash pages, websites, paid media campaigns. You've got your traditional out-of-home marketing print campaigns. You've got events, sales center activations, the branding of the actual development. So a condo project as a PM, generally two of our project managers specialize on the real estate side, is running every real estate launch is like its own business with every single need you need in a business from start to finish over a 6 to 12 month window. So that's really exciting. And that's where we've differentiated ourselves, is the ability for us to deliver all that work in such a tight turnaround and such a level of quality that they didn't have before. You can look at the biggest cities, New York, Miami, Toronto, and you'll see beautiful projects, campaigns, et cetera, because they're using the best agencies in the world. Every other secondary city is using some local shop that's probably templated the same real estate project forever. And we realize that our current level of expertise is to come in and shake up all of those secondary markets and own those. It's not to say we're not competing against the big guys in the big markets as well, but where we actually focus our growth efforts is on those secondary markets, so that I don't need to fight with the 500 person agency or the agency that already owns the most competitive landscapes. There's plenty of amazing projects in what I would call secondary cities around the world.
Justin, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just want to, thanks for sharing your journey. Thanks for sharing your stories and expertise. And I want to encourage people to check out himandher.ca to learn more about your work in the company. And, when you say Shopify Plus, my last question is kind of around what conferences and events do you like to go to that you are heard are good in that space? And I think I saw actually a video of you talking. I don't know if it was at Shop Talk, maybe, but what conferences and events do you like to attend or you heard are good to check out?
Yes, I'm a little bit, I would say, counter in that I don't actually go to the stack-based events. I feel that a lot of these companies like Shopify, they're doing a great job of releasing a lot of the core materials you need online. So those events are great for staff. So the Adobe event for our designers, some of those local tech get-togethers for our devs, just for networking and skill building. Most of my time as an owner is focused on the conferences where my target demographic is going to be. So the interior design show in Toronto, there's a lot of consumer goods companies that are also real estate adjacent. The home builder associations and the real estate associations, consumer goods shows, all of those where you can meet fellow agencies and see what's going on, but you can also interact with the target demographic that I'm after and can focus my network there versus the technical stacks. My view as an agency is that I want to use the simplest off-the-shelf software and piece it together. I don't need to build custom all the time. I don't need to use the fanciest thing. We use Shopify and we only use Shopify for e-commerce. It does its job well. It's got pros and cons. Every stack does. But the principle is, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to use all the great tools that are out there to reinvent the wheel. So the last example I'll give is on the condo side. We have a unique tool where we piece together Salesforce and DocuSign, and we've created a real-time point of sale system where you can buy a condo in 5 minutes, virtually or in person. And that $2 billion in sales we've done and helped market it, about $1 billion of that has gone through that tool, which has helped developers innovate and sell their projects out faster from anywhere in today's market. And that's just an example of, I don't need to build a CRM. I don't need to build a document signing thing. Aaron had the idea of 5 years ago, like, why can't we just send somebody a DocuSign without signing triplicates of paper? And why can't you pull up real-time inventory of all the units that are for sale? And that question then at an agency like ours prompted, okay, what technology can we use? We had the design skills to piece it all together, and magically we've got a product that we're selling to clients, and it's increasing our profitability.
That's ripe for disruption, because I went through a real estate transaction within the past year, and I'm like, why am I still signing paper? It doesn't make any sense. So hopefully more people adopt and get what you have in that space. I want to encourage everyone to check out himandher.ca. And Justin, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, everyone.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.